On a November night in 2025, Elena Rybakina stood on the biggest stage of the women's game, holding the WTA Finals trophy and the largest single payday in the history of her sport. And yet, she chose that exact moment to say almost nothing at all. Instead of smiling into a choreographed photo beside WTA CEO Portia Archer and runner-up Aryna Sabalenka, she took half a step back, waved off the officials gesturing her into frame, and let the cameras capture a jarring image of the tour's leader standing without its champion. That tiny gesture, barely a flick of the hand, was a louder indictment of the WTA than any press conference rant or social media thread could have ever been. And it left one question echoing across the tennis world. What kind of pressure pushes one of the sport's most reserved stars to make her rebellion silent, strategic, and global? If you are tired of the polished highlight reels and carefully scripted statements that never explain moments like this, stay here, because we are going to walk through the receipts, the investigation, and the calendar decisions that turned a compliant Wimbledon champion into the face of a simmering power struggle with the WTA. To understand how we got to that frozen non-photo in Riyadh, you have to start long before Rybakina raised that trophy. Elena Rybakina is not a natural agitator. She built her reputation on understatement, minimal reactions, soft-spoken interviews, a game that did most of the talking as she collected a Wimbledon title and established herself as one of the most dangerous players on faster courts. Yet around her, the structure of women's tennis was evolving into something far less predictable. The WTA, under new leadership and amid a global push for better safeguarding standards, was trying to prove it could protect players off the court as rigorously as it promoted them on it. That mission collided directly with Rybakina's inner circle when allegations about her longtime coach, Stefano Vukov, landed on the desk of the tour's safeguarding unit. According to detailed reporting on the subsequent investigation, family members and people close to Rybakina described a pattern of emotional and verbal abuse, including incidents where Vukov allegedly reduced her to tears, pushed her past safe physical limits, and bombarded her with messages and calls when she tried to create distance. Investigators concluded he had abused his authority and violated the code of conduct, and in early 2025, the WTA moved to suspend him for a year, with Archer herself reportedly signing the decision letter that would define the rest of the season. On paper, this looked like a straightforward safeguarding story, a governing body investigating a powerful coach, finding misconduct, and imposing a ban. In reality, it cracked open a messy tug-of-war between institutional responsibility and player agency that the WTA seemed unprepared to handle. Rybakina, the supposed victim the policy was meant to protect, did not align her public stance with the findings. In multiple comments throughout 2025, she insisted that she had never personally experienced mistreatment from Vukov and expressed frustration with how the process had been handled, from communication to outcomes. At one point, she had already been planning to bring him back after an earlier split, only to discover he was under provisional suspension and then fully banned. The decision was framed as protecting her, but from her perspective, it limited her freedom to choose the coach who would help build her career. While other players spoke more generally about the importance of safeguarding when asked, Rybakina described feeling isolated, saying she did not have close friends on tour and had received no real support as she navigated a scandal centered on her own team. That gap between the WTA's public posture as a protector and the lived reality of its most softly spoken star is where this power war truly began. The friction only intensified as the year unfolded. The ban on Vukov told one story, the WTA as an institution drawing a line and accepting the backlash that came with it. But behind the scenes, the dynamic was far murkier. Reporting later revealed that the suspension, which had been announced as a firm one-year ban, did not last its full term. After a period of arbitration, a private agreement was reached between Vukov and the tour, and by August, the ban was lifted, even as details of the original findings and the exact terms of the settlement remained shielded from public view. In plain language, the WTA had taken a strong public stance, then quietly softened that stance in a confidential setting, a choice that left everyone, including Rybakina, in an ambiguous space. On court and in press conferences, she continued to defend her coach's character from her own experience, while the written record of the investigation painted him as an abuser whose relationship with his player had become dangerously dependent and blurred professional lines. For fans and fellow players, it was hard to know which version of reality held more weight: the painful testimonies that triggered the investigation, the tour's formal safeguarding conclusions, or the champion who insisted she had not been harmed. For the WTA itself, the contradiction was worse because it invited one damning interpretation: that its safeguarding apparatus could be adjusted behind closed doors when the politics and optics demanded it. The symbolic breaking point came at the end of that fraught season when Rybakina stormed through the WTA Finals field and lifted the trophy at a time when the tour's relationship with her coach was still unsettled and deeply controversial. Here was a champion who had just dominated the circuit's showcase event precisely as the WTA was trying to show it could police toxic power dynamics. At the trophy ceremony, the script called for unity: champion, runner-up, and CEO posing together, selling the image of a thriving product. Instead, what viewers saw was a glitch in the choreography. As Sabalenka and Archer posed and officials signaled for Rybakina to join, she refused, maintaining distance while the photo was taken without her. She did not offer a grand speech, she did not point a finger or call anyone out by name. She simply rejected a photo that, in her eyes, would have been a public endorsement of the very leadership that had sanctioned, then quietly unsanctioned, the coach she still supports. That one decision carved a line through the season's narrative, the tour promoting itself as a guardian of player welfare, and its flagship champion using the moment of maximum visibility to show she didn't buy the story. Asked afterward why she had refused the photo with Archer, she declined to publicly spell out her reasoning, telling reporters there had been chances to talk during the investigation and they simply didn't happen. She framed her choice as something she preferred to keep private, even as cameras beamed the snub around the world and commentators filled the silence with speculation about Vukov, safeguarding, and bitter feelings over the way the case had been run. In other words, her resistance is deliberately underexplained, which forces fans and media to connect the dots themselves: a coach banned for abuse in a letter signed by the CEO, a player who disagrees with aspects of that process, a ban later lifted via private arbitration, and then a very public refusal to cooperate with the same CEO in the sport's most ceremonial moment. The WTA, for its part, declined to comment specifically on the snub and avoided escalating the confrontation, but the optics were clear. The organization relies on top players to validate its branding and safeguarding agenda. Rybakina showed that those same players can also withhold that validation, turning the spotlight back on the tour's own decision-making. Zoom out, and that standoff at the finals is only one piece of a broader pattern in how the WTA appears to manage Rybakina's presence on tour. For several seasons, she's voiced irritation with the calendar, including complaints about punishing travel and compressed schedules that leave little margin for recovery. After title runs, she has occasionally found herself dealing with early morning obligations or tight turnarounds that feel less like logistical coincidence and more like a system grinding down a top player without offering the kind of flexibility often extended to bigger commercial draws. In parallel, her relationship with the tour's promotional machinery remained cool. While other stars have leaned into collaborative content and storylines, Rybakina has tended to push back when she feels narrative pressure, whether that's about embracing a sanitized version of the safeguarding story or playing into manufactured rivalries. In one account of private conversations, she described being told that certain media and promotional asks were not optional and warned that refusal could affect how prominently she would feature in future campaigns. That's the quiet language of power in modern sport. Your face is a commodity, your compliance is expected, and if you step outside the lines, the consequences arrive not as suspensions or fines, but as a slow erasure from the narratives and schedules that shape your public value. Put alongside the Vukov case, this scheduling and promotional pressure looks less like a series of random annoyances and more like a pattern of soft control. On one side, the WTA can point to real obligations, mandatory media, appearances that satisfy sponsors, and a calendar that has to balance dozens of interests. On the other hand, Rybakina and others experience the way those obligations are enforced as selective and strategic. Top men's stars, for example, often receive bespoke scheduling, night sessions, prime courts, carefully spaced matches that maximize both performance and exposure. When Rybakina has raised concerns about back-to-back commitments or seemingly inflexible match times, the answer has sometimes been that nothing can be moved, even in situations where historical precedent suggests the tour and tournaments can in fact adjust when it suits them. The result is a perception that the system can be responsive and generous when a player fits neatly into the story it wants to tell, and rigid when that same player is out of alignment with its preferred narratives. Her silent protest in Riyadh, then, was not an isolated act of pique, but the visible tip of an iceberg built from months of feeling overruled in private and under-recognized in public. The most uncomfortable part of this saga is that nobody comes out looking clean. The WTA can credibly argue that it has a duty to intervene when credible allegations of abuse arise, and that failing to act would be a betrayal of the very players who rely on it for protection. At the same time, the opaque way the Vukov case was handled, from the confidential nature of the findings to the quiet unwinding of the ban, leaves the impression of a governing body more concerned with managing liability and optics than with offering transparent, consistent standards. Rybakina, meanwhile, stands at the crossroads of those pressures. By openly defending a coach whose behavior was described in stark terms in an internal letter and subsequent reporting, she has aligned herself against the version of events presented by complainants and investigators, which is uncomfortable for observers who take safeguarding seriously. But her refusal to snap into line with a narrative she does not trust also exposes the structural gap in how the tour involves its stars in these processes, and how little room there is for players to challenge decisions without being painted as ungrateful or complicit. It is precisely because she is so reserved that her defiance feels methodical. She is not chasing drama, she is drawing a line about who gets to curate the story of her career. In the end, the hidden power dynamics in Rybakina's standoff with the WTA are less about a single photo or a single ban and more about who gets to wield soft power in a sport that sells empowerment while still running on opaque politics. The WTA can control investigations, scheduling levers, and promotional spotlights. Rybakina controls her presence, her endorsements, and, crucially, her silence. By refusing a photo, by staying vague in her explanations, by continuing to play and win while keeping the institution at arm's length, she has turned that silence into a weapon that the tour cannot easily neutralize without escalating a conflict it would rather keep buried. Her quiet defiance does not overturn the findings of any safeguarding report, and it does not absolve anyone of serious allegations, but it does expose how fragile the tour's authority looks when one of its biggest champions decides she will no longer play her scripted role. The next time a trophy ceremony or promotional clip feels strangely incomplete, remember that what you are not seeing, the conversations that never happened, the meetings that stayed secret, the photo that never got taken, might be the clearest window into how power really works in the WTA.